What if the most powerful man in Russia was defined not by what he did, but by what he refused to open? A sealed envelope. Unmarked. Unclaimed. Untouched for decades. Why did Putin carry it from Berlin to Moscow, from war rooms to private retreats, yet never break the seal? Was it blackmail? A forgotten identity? Or something far more dangerous? Tonight, we open that door. Because once you hear what he chose not to read, you'll never look at him the same again. The letter arrived without a name. The snow had already begun to fall in Leningrad, soft flakes drifting in the dark like static on an old screen. Inside the KGB district office, the lights never flickered. Concrete walls, metal file cabinets, the scent of tobacco and cold paper, everything stayed exactly as it should. But that night, something arrived that didn't belong. A courier dropped it at the front desk. No name. No return mark. Just a brown envelope, sealed with red wax and the symbol of Division 5, an office that technically didn't exist. The receptionist didn't question it. Just passed it along. Room 304. Senior analyst. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. He was younger then. Lean, controlled, watchful. The kind of man who read everything twice and said nothing once. When the envelope landed on his desk, he didn't touch it right away. He looked at it for a full minute. The wax was cracked on the side, as if someone had almost opened it, then stopped. There was no handwriting. No official stamp. Just silence in paper form. He picked it up. It was heavier than it should have been. Inside, he could feel the weight shift, something more than just documents. He considered opening it, but instinct told him no. And in the KGB, instinct wasn't something you ignored. He placed it inside his locked drawer and went back to work. Hours passed. That night, he dreamed of a corridor with no doors. Just walls lined with boxes. Every box had his name. Some were open, others sealed. In the dream, he reached for one. But before he could touch it, a voice said, "Not yet." When he woke, the envelope was still in the drawer. Unopened. Over the next week, strange things began to happen. His access clearance increased without request. Files he hadn't asked for appeared on his desk. Surveillance reports from places he had never been, signed under his name. No one questioned it. It was as if the system had quietly shifted its weight toward him, and he hadn't noticed until it was already leaning. He asked his supervisor about it. The man barely looked up from his tea. "Promotions come in different forms," he said. "Some are invitations. Others are tests." "What kind is this?" Putin asked. The man smiled. "That depends on whether you open the envelope." Putin returned to his office. The drawer felt colder than it should have. When he pulled it open, the envelope was gone. He froze. Only for a moment. Then he checked the cabinet. The trash. The safe. Nowhere. It was as if it had never been there. But the next morning, it was back. Same place. Same drawer. Same crack in the seal. This time, a note was tucked beneath it. Handwritten. No signature. What you don't open defines you more than what you do. He held the envelope in his hand. It felt warmer now, almost alive. His instincts warred against curiosity. In KGB training, they taught you that unopened information had power. Once you read it, you were accountable. But if you refused, then someone else owned the consequences. He placed it back in the drawer. Locked it. Swallowed the key. He told himself he would never open it. And that decision, made in silence, in a gray room with no witnesses, would become the most important one of his life. Because sometimes the thing you refuse to know shapes everything you become. The promotion with no instructions. 2 days after he chose not to open the envelope, Putin was called into a room he didn't know existed. It wasn't listed on any floor plan. No name on the door. Just a security clearance lock that blinked once when he approached, then opened without a sound. Inside, a single chair, a metal table, and a man already waiting. The man didn't introduce himself. Didn't ask questions. Just slid a folder across the table and said, "Effective immediately, you're being reassigned." To where? To Division 5. "There's no Division 5, Putin replied. The man smiled, thin and mechanical. Exactly. No further explanation was given. No documents to sign. The folder was blank inside, just a single keycard with no label. When he walked out, nobody looked at him. Not the guards. Not the secretaries. As if he had been erased and re-entered under new terms. The next morning, his office door had changed. No number. The hallway had been emptied. His nameplate was gone. Inside, the air felt sterile. His desk was bare. Only one item sat in the center, the same envelope, untouched. No one had moved it. No one had claimed responsibility. But now, it was part of the room, like a fixture. It didn't ask to be opened. It didn't threaten. It waited. His first assignment came in the form of a voice recording. No written brief. Just a cassette marked Case 0. You are to oversee the observation of subject Z14. Do not engage. Do not interfere. Do not question the motive. Record every deviation. There was no mention of who Z14 was. But the next file that arrived contained surveillance photos. Blurred figures. A woman and a child. Berlin. Prague. Vienna. Always one step ahead of the lens. He recognized the woman's face from old archives. A defector who had once worked inside the Lubyanka. Vanished under mysterious circumstances. The child, however, was unfamiliar. Red hair. Always holding a book. Never looking at the camera. He asked no questions. That was part of the deal now. Weeks passed. Reports compiled. Flights taken without destination labels. Assignments completed without confirmation. He was becoming something less visible. Less defined. But every time he returned, the envelope was there. No matter the country. The city. The office. It waited. One night, he stayed late. Everyone else was gone. He poured a glass of vodka and sat staring at it for an hour. The wax seal hadn't changed. The crack still lingered, like a wound that had healed incorrectly. He touched it. It was cold again. At exactly 2:17 a.m., his office phone rang. No one knew that number. He picked up. A voice whispered, "Do you still not want to know?" He said nothing. The line went dead. He opened the drawer. Pulled out the envelope. Stared at it like it might open itself. Then placed it back. And for the first time, he locked the drawer and left the key on the desk. A test, he thought. If it disappears again, it's not mine anymore. The man without a shadow. By winter, Putin had learned to move through rooms without being noticed. Not out of fear, but precision. Division 5 had a way of teaching silence that felt more like control than absence. You didn't just stop speaking. You stopped leaving a trace. His movements were tracked, of course. But not by superiors. Not anymore. A different presence had begun to follow him. It wasn't a person. It was the envelope. Always there. Always exactly where it shouldn't be. He had left it once on a train to Novosibirsk, tucked under the seat. 2 days later, it reappeared inside his jacket pocket. No one had touched him. He had tried burning it. The wax blackened but refused to melt. The paper curled but wouldn't catch fire. When he threw it in the Volga, it sank. 3 hours later, it was back in his briefcase. He stopped trying after that. Division 5 gave him more tasks. Stranger ones. He was asked to sit across from defectors and say nothing. Just observe them for patterns. Stutters. Hesitations. One man begged him to explain what this was all for. Putin just watched. Another time, he was sent to collect a sealed file from a man in Warsaw. The man handed it over with trembling fingers and said, "If you open this, you stop being who you were." He brought it back, unopened. He was becoming something else. The man in the reports. The figure in the reflection that never turned at the same time. His neighbors stopped making eye contact. The clerk at the market rang him up in silence. Even his dog began barking at corners he wasn't standing in. And yet, through it all, the envelope remained his only constant. Sometimes, when he stared at it long enough, he could swear it moved slightly. As if breathing. One night, he woke up in a cold sweat. Not from a nightmare, but from not dreaming. He hadn't dreamt in weeks. His mind felt wiped clean every morning. When he finally cracked and called a neurologist, the man arrived wearing a government badge Putin didn't recognize. "You've entered a pattern state," the doctor said calmly. "What does that mean?" "It means your brain is protecting you." "From what?" The doctor pointed to the envelope on the table. "That." Putin didn't ask how he knew about it. He just nodded. The doctor left without charging him. The next day, a file appeared. Inside, surveillance footage. The same woman and child again, older now. Still together. Still unreadable. But this time, the woman looked into the camera. Directly. Not by accident. And behind her, taped to a cafe window in Dresden, was the envelope. Exactly the same. Putin paused the video. Zoomed in. His fingers trembled. This wasn't tracking. It was taunting. That envelope wasn't a message. It was a mirror. And whatever it reflected back at him, he wasn't sure he wanted to see anymore. The woman who wasn't a stranger. The photo haunted him for days. The woman's eyes were sharp, too sharp for coincidence. People don't stare into surveillance cameras by accident. Not with that kind of calm. That kind of knowing. Putin pulled every file he could. Cross-referenced every archive. The system said she didn't exist. Her last known ID had been deactivated in 1979. Cause of death, unconfirmed. Yet there she was, walking past a bakery in Dresden, 30 years later, wearing the same scarf as in the Lubyanka personnel file. He booked a flight. No mission order. No authorization. Just a gut pull that even Division 5 wouldn't dare challenge. Dresden hadn't changed much. Still gray. Still cold. The cafe from the footage was real, tucked between a bookstore and a florist. The window was different now, no envelope. Just fogged glass and old flyers. He sat inside and waited. 4 hours. Then she walked in. Same coat. Same face. But now, older. Composed. She looked at him, nodded slightly, and sat 2 tables away. No words. Just silence charged with memory. Putin didn't blink. After 10 minutes, she stood and walked to the counter. Bought nothing. Just slipped a small paper into the tip jar and left. He waited until she was out of sight. Then approached the jar. The note was folded 4 times. Inside, a single line. Open it before they do. That night in his hotel, he placed the envelope on the desk again. It had followed him, of course. He no longer questioned how. It just was. He studied it under lamplight. The wax shimmered slightly, like skin under heat. He reached for it. Stopped. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Silence. Then her voice. "You need to remember who you were before the file." He froze. "I don't know what that means." "You do," she said. "They've just convinced you otherwise." The line cut. He opened his briefcase, dumped every file onto the bed. Nothing unusual. Until one photo slipped free, a photo he didn't remember seeing before. It was her. And beside her, a man. Him. But not in any timeline he recalled. He was smiling. Holding the child's hand. Wearing civilian clothes. The back of the photo read. Before the rewrite. He stood up too fast. The room spun. Rewrite? He checked the envelope again. Still sealed. But now, something had changed. The seal wasn't cracked anymore. It was fully restored. Like time itself had reversed around it. He didn't sleep that night. At dawn, he walked through Dresden's alleys until he reached the address scribbled on the back of the photo. An old building, 3rd floor. The door was open. Inside, dusty furniture. Silence. But on the table, waiting under a glass dome. The envelope. Identical. But next to it, a second one. Different seal. Different color. And beneath it, a note in handwriting that looked vaguely like his own. One shows you the truth. The other lets you keep the lie. He stared at both. Which one had followed him all these years? Which one had he chosen, without even knowing? The decision that changed nothing and everything. He stared at the two envelopes for nearly an hour. No movement. No whisper. Just wait. Silent, still, unbearable wait. One had followed him for decades, an echo of a choice never made. The other? A question mark. A fork in time, hand-delivered by someone he used to be. He didn't touch either. Not yet. Instead, he walked to the mirror above the fireplace. For the first time in years, he saw his own eyes not as others saw them, but as if he were a stranger. They weren't cold. Just tired. Not cruel. Just worn. This wasn't power. This was erosion. The knock came at exactly 3:33 a.m. He expected it. Behind the door stood the woman. Older now, but unchanged in the ways that mattered. She didn't smile. Just walked past him and sat at the table. "You know what this is," she said. "I don't know which one's real," he replied. "They both are. That's the problem." He sat across from her. The silence between them stretched, not awkward, not hostile, but dense with things unspoken. "You had a son," she said finally. He didn't react. "You had a name before they gave you this one. You had a purpose before they handed you instructions." He glanced at the photo again. The smile. The small hand in his. "Was it real?" he asked. "Real enough that you buried it." She stood and placed a small recorder on the table. "Play this when I leave. But only after you choose." "Choose what?" "To open the truth, or continue protecting the lie." He looked at the two envelopes again. Same shape. Same size. Different futures. She left without waiting. He poured himself a drink. Sat in a silence. Watched the city lights flicker outside. Then, with hands steady but heart pounding, he chose one. The one that had always been with him. The seal cracked easily this time, as if it had only been pretending to resist. Inside? Nothing. Just a mirror fragment. And one phrase etched into the paper's surface. The truth doesn't live in documents. It lives in what you refuse to destroy. He blinked. That's when he understood. The envelope had never held anything. It was the act of choosing not to open it that defined him. It was the refusal that built the myth, that made him unpredictable, unreadable, untouchable. And now that he'd broken it, he was just a man again. The recorder clicked to life. Her voice spoke, steady and soft. "Welcome back, Vladimir. You're free to remember now." Outside, the sky began to lighten. He stood, walked to the window, and watched as the city opened its eyes. For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. But he also knew peace never lasts. Because somewhere in the world, another envelope had just arrived. Unmarked. Unopened. Waiting. You've just witnessed the story of a decision that outlived its consequences. A choice wrapped not in paper, but in power, fear, and silence. If this made you think differently about the man behind the curtain, then there's more where that came from. Hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment about what you think was inside that envelope. And give us a like if you want to keep uncovering stories that history never published. This is Hidden Chapters, where secrets are stories, waiting to be told.